So I guess that's the first place to start, is to look at the buds in a tree and work out what you're trying to achieve. And for different types of fruit, it'll be a different outlook. Yeah. So if we're looking at big old trees that haven't been pruned for a long time, you need to have, well, you don't need to at all. From a commercial point of view, we're trying to have strong buds for bigger fruit, and we're trying to have a tree that crops every year. So different varieties, so something like Fuji will want to crop every second year, and so you sort of approach that differently, because on a year where you don't have a lot of bud, you'll prune it lightly, or you might do some chunk pruning rather than the detail. In Pink Lady and Grannies, where we are, they yield really well annually. So you're just constantly trying to keep good buds in the tree. So you've got all your good 2-year-old buds. We say 2-year-old because they grow out of a 1-year-old shoot. So next year, if this is left in the tree, we'll have a nice spur buds up the length of that. And if you're keeping a good lot of 2-year-old buds in your tree, then you really set up well to have crops every year. For every cut you make, you cause a reaction. And if you're taking too much of those buds out, obviously you can have less fruit, and the tree's going to want to do something with all the energy and vigour that it's got, and it'll grow. I guess if we were able to, we would do something like the heading cuts in summer, or even better is ripping them rather than cutting them. In reality, so rather than chopping it, you're just ripping a shoot out, and so that wound there, I think it's something like 10 times as many cells are damaged in a rip compared to a cut. And so it takes the tree that much longer for it to heal and reshoot, that it's a great way of taking the vigour out of a tree. So for me, I'm looking at branches like this that are crossing over, and just shortening branches that are so a tree is this size. We're looking at this branch is the structure which holds the fruiting unit. So we're not really looking for fruit on the branch, and we're always going to get a few, but we're really trying to grow fruit. It's not a good example because it's underneath. We're trying to grow fruit on these units that come out to the side. For us, the primary function of pruning is that we're looking at crop load, and we know it costs us a heap of money to hand thin. It's hard to thin flowers with sprays. So with pruning, you're sort of looking at maybe on something like Fuji, I'd like to have 2 or 3 buds for every apple that I want to end up with, because I know being biennial, I might need to leave more buds in there because less of them will be fruitful, and I'm trying to keep buds for next year. So with Pink Lady, it's probably more like 1.5 buds per apple. Now that's the theory behind it, and then you go and prune and hopefully you end up with something similar. It's a lot easier in a small tree where we know we're trying to grow 20 kilograms on that tree. They're going to be 6 or 7 apples in a kilo. So if we have 150 apples on that tree when we're picking, then that's going to be ideal for what we're trying to do, knowing the trees can do it each year, knowing our water and our fertiliser inputs. On a tree like this, it's a lot more about looking at a branch and what a branch can take. And there are calculations for the diameter of a branch as to how many fruit you can fit on it. It sort of goes up to about 10 mils, being around 10 apples for Pink Lady. But then as it gets bigger than that, then it's not exponential, but it's a much bigger yield per millimetre as you go above that 10 mil. So winter's when we've got, where you can see the structure of the tree. Winter, we don't have any fruit on the tree that we're trying to work around. If it's not winter, then you've got fruit on the tree that you're trying to, cutting off 10 apples hurts, doesn't it? So I think it all comes down to what if you've got problems with something that's growing too strongly, doing summertime shoot ripping and pruning in summer, but generally winter's probably a better time to do it. So anyway, so I'm thinking, I'm thinking from a point of view of I've got a calm tree. I don't really want, this is some 1-year-old growth here. I mean, this is just ideal growth for us. I don't want to do too much, and I don't need to do much at all. It's buds that are under the trunk that are going to be under the branch, that are going to be in the shade. Little fruits that are in the underneath.
You're cutting them because they're in the shade.
Yeah, and then I'm taking the ones off the top that are going to make the shade. And I'm thinking about when they fall over, that there's space for them, and I'm shortening something that I think is a bit long and spacing out the buds that are there, so that if we do get a fruit on each of them, that they've got space. And this, like I say, this is probably not a great tree to to talk about, because I think this is something that I'm happy with already. So I'm thinking about branches that are too low, branches that are crossing over. So when we look at branches like this, we want to have the fruiting units off the side. We're looking for this sort of length. Once you get something that's the same diameter as the trunk, it just makes it hard to get into the tree. It makes the branch here much thicker, and the thicker the branch is, the more water shoots we'll get. Yep, but the more water shoots we'll get from it. So we know that and I mean, trees are a little bit different when they're vases. Whenever you've got a branch that's pointing up the sky, the tree is producing oxygen, which is telling the tree keep growing. When you've got a branch that tips over, you're not producing that oxygen as much, and the tree knows it's fruiting now. So to have flat branches or descending branches are better. It's a much more fruitful and calmer branch. We'd much rather have a branch coming out flat and then descending than one that wants to go skyward and you're trying to push it down. So when we're in younger trees and we're tying them down, we're tying down the 1-year-old shoots, and you can get that in the right position straight away. Next year you've got buds, and often they'll kick up a little bit on the end, but generally they're calm enough that you've set up a piece of wood there that's going to be in the tree for the rest of its life. Whereas I suppose older trees are more about renewal and replacing wood. I would be definitely taking out that bigger one in the middle. So we want sunlight to come down into the tree so that we can have shoots like this, fruiting units, whatever you call them, lower in the tree. And this sort of stuff, making shade up high, is counterproductive, isn't it? Where we've got branches stacked on top of each other, choosing what we like. But again, for us, we're thinking about having apples that rub together, rub on other parts of the tree. I guess with what we're doing these days, we do probably use a lot more rules. With older trees, I think it was more about that looks all right sort of thing, you know. Younger trees, we say, sort of 6 branches on a metre of trunk. So in the end, we might have about 20 branches on a tree. But something like this, loosely, we've sort of treated this, while it's a vase shape, we've tried to think in terms of having 6 or 7 central leader trees on the one stump. In reality, we've got big ugly branches that we would never leave in there if it was a central leader and it was small. And yeah, there's a classic one coming up there that probably shouldn't be there if we're talking about branches that are descending being fruitful and calm and our best. Well, I think probably no choice but to prune it in winter with a cut like that. I mean, certainly you can come in summer, but if you do it in winter now, you're going to get all this water shoot growth there. But you come back around the long side of the year and rip all of those out. It's going to be a 2-step process, but I think you'd have a pretty calm reaction. The tree will react to a cut. Yeah, so I'll be choosing something that's at least a couple of years old as a side lateral to take the new top. While you've still got leaves all over the tree and you've picked the fruit, the tree's taken a big sigh of relief, and now it's building up its carbohydrates for spring. So all those leaves are producing the sort of the energy that maybe you want or maybe you're fighting against. Pruning them after harvest while they've still got their leaves on, you're reducing that carbohydrate production that limb would have made. So yeah. So Pink Lady, we're wanting fruit that's exposed to the sun, like we said, for colour. On these are grannies. We've got a lot more on the inside, a lot more sort of pendant that's going to, it's not ideal from a point of view of limb rub. There'll be fruit there that's downgraded because it's rubbing, but there's a lot more shade in a tree like that. I'm looking at this tree here and thinking that's a lovely tree. I'm really happy with that because it's so balanced and calm. The sort of pruning on this is really minimal, and it's probably even doing a bit of shoot ripping and taking a few buds off. It's really straightforward, I think. Ideally the top would be held up because there's fruits on top. It's likely to Being Fuji, it's really bendy, so it probably won't snap, but then it'll have a permanent top like this, unless we take it again. But then a tree like this has got a branch here that should have been, well, it's been tied down but not well. So this is the string I was talking about, it's really biodegradable. But this branch was always a bad branch for us because it's so thick. It's, we sort of say it needs to be less than a third the diameter of the trunk, whereas that's probably 50% or possibly more. It's taking too much vigour and it's always going to be a problem. And so we've tried to tie it down when it probably shouldn't have been. We might have been able to keep it for a few years, but in this sort of system, this would have grown so many water shoots on it that we still would have just cut it off in a couple of years' time anyway. So I'd take that now and leave branches that are pendant and fruitful with nice fat buds on them. And in a block like this, we take a few big branches out. It doesn't have that big a effect on the total production of the block. So tree needs to know where its top is. So we were always, if we need to lower it, like we talked about timing, we're trying to find something, a shoot that's at least 2 years old. That's the less we can decrease the height in 1 year, the calmer it is, of course. In here, it becomes an issue on some of the stronger trees like this, and without going up the ladder, it's hard to really decide which one, but I'm probably inclined to come down about 600 mil from the top to the one that's coming out to the western side there, and then taking a few off around that area so the tree isn't confused by having a bit of a crow's foot on top. It knows this is the top, that's where the vigour will go, and it's a lot easier to control that next year when the tree has a clear top to it. But the problem with these trees in the home garden is that you've got to have a post beside them, or because of this is an M26 rootstock, so it's a heavily dwarfing rootstock. It's great for growing fruit every year and bigger fruit, but it's held up somewhere else. You could espalier them or something like that if you had the time. Trees like that, I think we've probably got 2 branches we can take from it. So what are the 2 that I like the least? Knowing that if we do more than that, we're going to end up with a bit of a monster. So this angle here, I'm not sure if the camera can see it, but it's a really steep, this is always going to be a problematic branch. So if we're going to keep one of these, I think it needs a string on it to hold it in the right spot. This one here we end up with, because of that steep angle, it's the chance of this splitting out here, but it's also always going to be taking more, but it's going to be too vigorous for us because of that. And so if we tie that down, looks a little bit ugly to me, but generally it's okay. But what we're going to find is that every year we have strong water shoots here because of the angle of coming out of the trunk. To come back to this one, I was saying earlier, I think I like sort of six branches per metre of tree, so you probably pick me up on every tree here and say you got too many branches. But this here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all within. So I guess over time we'd need to look at trying to space this out. We get a real constriction on the trunk from here down to here. We're trying to, the risk here is that you don't get enough. This tree's a bad example because it's got so much vigour, but the risk is when you've got a series of branches close together, they take too much vigour out of the tree and the top will rut. So for me, I'd probably end up taking 6 branches out of the tree. I don't like that one, I don't like that one. It's horrible, isn't it? But we're doing more and more of this sort of ripping because we'll end up with fruit buds on here when otherwise they would never become fruitful. This would have been a strong shoot to the sky.